Today we're talking about brakes, specifically brake fluid. What do you think of that intro, huh? Welcome to Ventre Synthetic Lubricants. Today I'm going to talk about brake fluid a little bit, and then we're going to flush the brakes on my Buell here. So brake fluid is the hydraulic fluid that makes your brake system work. You pull the lever or push the pedal, it compresses the liquid, and then that activates the piston in either your caliper or your wheel cylinder. So the important number when we're talking about brake fluid is the boiling point. So the boiling point for DOT4, which is what this uses, the SAE standard is 446 degrees. This one is 580 degrees. The importance of that is that when brake fluid is a liquid, in a liquid form, the molecules are really small and really tight together. There's not a lot of space between them. So when you compress the brakes, it doesn't take a lot of travel to compress them and then thereby push the piston in the caliper or wheel cylinder. What happens is if the fluid boils, then it turns into a gas. The gas molecules are further spaced apart, and so when you apply the brakes, it takes more travel and more pressure to compress them. That'll give you a mushy brake feeling. So that's why that number is so important. And that's why AMSOIL formulates theirs to run, have a higher boiling point. So brake fluid, it absorbs water by its nature. DOT3 and DOT4 do. So the problem with getting water in the system is that the water boils at 212 degrees. So the water will boil off, create vapor, thereby making the brakes ineffective. There are a couple different types of brake fluid. You got DOT2, that's going to be old, basically obsolete unless you have some sort of a vintage vehicle or something like that. You got 3 and 4. 3 and 4 are very similar. 4 just has a higher boiling point. You can replace 3 with 4, obviously not the other way around. 5 is silicone based. You cannot use any other one with 5 or use 5 in any of the others. With 2, you can't upgrade to 3 or 4 without upgrading the braking system because the composition is not the same and it'll cause the seals to go bad. So now I'm going to show you how I flush my brakes. I do it once a year on my motorcycles, at least once every other year on my vehicles. That's pretty standard what the manufacturers recommend, because the brake fluid is going to absorb water in there over time, and the higher water content you get, the lower your boiling point is going to get, and then it could become dangerous. So I'm going to show you how I do it on here. It's going to be basically the same for every hydraulic braking system. Obviously components are different, locations are different, things like that, but it's going to be the basic same process. The first thing I do is I put rags around the reservoir because brake fluid is very corrosive and it's not good for paint. So I want to try and avoid any mistakes I might make. Okay, next thing I'm going to take this cap off of here. It's got 2 screws. And then inside you've usually got some sort of a diaphragm. A rubber seal there. Now I'm going to take as much out of here as I can. During this entire process, I do not want the fluid level to fall below the bottom of this reservoir, because then I'll suck air in and then I have to bleed the air out. So I want to just avoid bleeding altogether by continually keeping the fluid above that level so no air can go in the system. But what I want to do is, so that I don't have to pump all of this out, I want to suck as much of this out as I can, and then I'll put fresh on top, and then we'll pump the old out from the bottom. Now that that's empty, I'll put fresh in there. And I'll top it up because I'm going to pump a lot of it out. So what I'll do is I'll pump some out and then check it, make sure I don't go below that line. And then repeat the process. Pump more out and then check it. Now I'm going to put my wrench onto the bleeder screw. And I'll put the hose of the bleeder onto the end. And then I'm just going to build pressure on the bleeder. I always want to maintain pressure so that it can't suck air back in. And then I'm going to crack the I'll crack the bleeder screw about a quarter turn. Maybe a little more. Here you can see there's air bubbles. There's no air bubbles because the system has been sealed. It's just that the seal of the hose around the bleeder valve is leaking. And then I want to tighten it with pressure on it. And then I need to check my reservoir and make sure it's not getting too low. I added a little more and I'm going to keep pumping. Usually you can tell by when the fluid changes color, you know that you're into the new stuff. This one on my bike, I change it every year. So you can't really tell. You just need to pump enough to clean the line out. So I just do a couple reservoirs full. But continue the process. Make sure you close that valve before stopping the pressure. Then we'll tighten it up, make sure it's tight, and put the cap back on. Then once we're done bleeding it all through, we're going to come up top and top it off. And put the cap back on. Next, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the rear. Take the seat off. There's two bolts up here under the back corners. You fold the back corners up, take the bolts out. This one happens to be under the seat. Most motorcycles I've had, the reservoir's out in the open. This has a different style reservoir, actually more common for sport bikes, the plastic reservoir. So we'll do the same thing, take the cap off, and then pull the diaphragm out. Then again, I'm just going to pump it out, making sure I don't go below that line. Then we'll top it up with fresh fluid. Then we're going to do the exact same thing again. Pop that cap off, put our wrench on. And put our bleeder hose on. Then build the pressure and break it loose. So I do that a couple times pump a couple reservoirs worth through there. Then we'll make sure that's tight. Put the cap back on. Okay, next we'll top it up. And we'll put the cap on. So that's it, guys. Basic brake system flushing. Like I said, it's going to be about the same for all hydraulic brake systems. The most important thing is you don't want that fluid level to drop below the on the reservoir to allow air into the system, because then you're going to have to bleed all that out. My bleeder didn't seal on the bleed screw today, so you could see bubbles. But normally you would have, when you got a good seal, you'll have a steady stream of fluid, and you don't want to see any bubbles in there because that means you got air in your system. And then you got to keep pumping, keep pumping, keep pumping until you get all that air out. If you'd like more information on AMSOIL products and where to get them, check out the link below to my website. Check out Ventre Synthetic Lubricants on Facebook. If you like the video, click the thumbs up and subscribe. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.